Have you ever stopped and just noticed a really striking paradox in modern society? The source material we're exploring in today's explainer points out a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling contrast. The author argues that we're looking at a culture that aggressively demands the rights of an adult while fiercely holding on to the soul of a child. It's this massive tension between craving total, absolute independence, yet totally shrinking away from the heavy burdens that independence historically requires. So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking pop psychoanalysis and the infantilization of youth. We are going to dive impartially into a highly provocative thesis about how a specific ideological version of psychoanalysis might have accidentally or intentionally shifted the very foundation of our culture. All right, let's jump right into part one, the culture of accusation. So to really get how clinical tools turned into a societal weapon, we kind of have to rewind back to Freud. He placed childhood at the absolute center of how our minds are formed. Suddenly, our parents, our hidden desires, and our traumas became the ultimate keys to understanding our personalities. Now, it is totally crucial to note up front that the author absolutely acknowledges the real clinical value here. Childhood trauma genuinely leaves a mark. A child who is rejected or abandoned will carry that pain, and the source material doesn't deny the reality of human suffering for a second. But right here is the crucial turning point of the text. A genuine therapeutic investigation is supposed to lead to self-awareness, right? It should prompt you to ask, okay, now that I see my history, what should I do with my life? But the author argues that as this clinical language leaked into everyday pop culture, it mutated, it morphed into a culture of endless accusation. It shifted the big question to, who is to blame for me being this way? And this seemingly small shift is devastating because it completely strips away our own moral agency. Which brings us to our second section, the rupture with authority. How did the shift actually play out in the real world? Well, revolutionary movements in the 20th century quickly realized that psychoanalytic language could be weaponized. If the father represents authority and morality represents repression, well then destroying the family looks exactly like liberation. Think about these famous slogans from the era. It is forbidden to forbid and don't trust anyone over 30. The author points out that these weren't just youthful rebellion, they were a deliberate, symbolic rupture with tradition and the very concept of authority itself. And this inevitably leads to a massive reevaluation of the family unit. According to the text, despite all its inevitable flaws, the traditional family served a vital purpose. It was the first school of reality. It's where you learned that, hey, not every single desire you have can or should be fulfilled. It provided an environment that instilled essential boundaries, teaching limits, duty, obedience, and sacrifice. So the author builds this into a clear, albeit troubling, cause and effect progression for modern society. Step 1, when pop psychoanalysis takes over, parents become permanent suspects. They're the automatic culprits for any negative emotion. Step 2, authority is no longer seen as a tool for building character. It's viewed purely as oppression. And the inevitable result? An increasingly fragile youth. By weaponizing this language against the family, the argument goes, we get a generation largely unable to handle frustration or the word no. Moving on, let's explore section 3, the paradox of youth. This all leads to some incredibly striking contradictions we see today. The cascading demands outlined in the text are really revealing. The author notes a desire for autonomy without making any sacrifices, a demand for freedom without any underlying discipline, a generation that wants its opinions validated without putting in the study, expects respect without demonstrating honor, and desires love without personal renunciation. Basically, it's a list of demands for all the perks of adulthood, with literally none of the heavy moral responsibility. You actually hear this play out in our everyday language all the time. Notice the focus. The text points out there is heavy talk about trauma, but very little about duty. A massive hyperfixation on wounds, but rarely a discussion about responsibilities. There's a constant elevation of authenticity, while the pursuit of actual virtue is practically ignored. It's an obsession with freedom while totally rejecting the moral weight that true freedom actually requires. Now, let's hit pause for a second, because the author draws a really crucial line here. Absolutely no one is saying that trauma doesn't exist. Terrible environments, toxic families, and real traumas are painful facts of life. Denying them would be cruel. But there is a hard boundary presented here. Recognizing a real wound is one thing, transforming that wound into your entire identity is another. Understanding a deformed emotion is a totally valid clinical step, but using it to justify a lifetime of immaturity, that is where the danger lies. This sets us up perfectly for our final section, victimhood versus maturity. It all boils down to a stark binary choice for the future of individual development.
On one side, we have a framework that matures. This approach says you are wounded, now you must understand your wound so you are not a slave to it. That leads to freedom. On the flip side, we have a framework that infantilizes. This ideological approach says you were wounded, therefore your entire life and all your failings can be perfectly excused by it. That second path, the author argues it inevitably breeds lifelong resentment.
When an entire society adopts this infantilizing mindset, it creates what the author refers to as the eternal adolescent. By symbolically killing the father, they reject all inheritance and tradition. They operate as if the world literally begins with their own desires and pains. The eternal adolescent doesn't want to be formed, and they certainly don't want to be corrected. They just want to be confirmed. They basically expect the entire world to adapt to their emotions, rather than adapting themselves to reality. Just to be crystal clear on the source material, this critique is strictly aimed at an ideology. It is not an attack on clinical psychology or medicine as a whole. It's a critique of a cultural mindset that trades personal conscience for constant accusation, that trades the hard, gritty work of maturity for the comfortable, warm blanket of victimhood. It puts parents on a permanent trial, explaining everything away by the past while entirely ignoring human reason, free will, and our present-day responsibility.
Ultimately, the text argues that true analysis has to illuminate our emotions, not canonize our resentments. It should help us see our history so we can actually overcome it, rather than remaining permanently trapped inside it. Which leaves us with this incredible, profound final question from the author. Not, who hurt me, but rather, facing the truth I now see, what kind of person do I choose to become?